And we are live. Hey everyone, JLR Investigates. Come on in, come on in, come on in. Bryan Kohberger, Moscow, Idaho, 4 talk going on. Court hearing. He had a court hearing. We missed it yesterday. Had a couple people that testified at his court hearing that we have never heard speak. One, an expert hired by the defense named Cy Ray. And that court hearing, by the way, was long, very, very long yesterday. And then lead investigator Brett Payne. And I said, man, we got to cover this. But the court hearing was for like hours. And then apparently some of it went closed because of the DNA experts, Bicca Barlow and Leah Larkin. But we wanted to focus on Payne because Payne is the lead investigator in this case. And I know that a lot of people with the Moscow, Idaho case, the tragedy that occurred, feel like Payne is sketchy or he wasn't qualified or enough or he was covering things up. A lot of people in this chat on JLR Investigates, feel, there's something going on in Moscow. Well, we hear him. And I wanted to play actually his testimony, only his testimony, and Ann Taylor will speak and the prosecution will speak. It's about 45 minutes long, but let's listen to Brett Payne because Brett Payne, I read that he said, this is the first time me actually watching this hearing too. So we're watching it all together for the first time. I haven't watched it yet, his testimony, but I read that 79 different businesses and residents have video surveillance. It's what he's going to testify. Thousands of hours. It's going to be interesting stuff, and we'll see if Ann Taylor can trip him up, or will he stand his ground and do kind of like what he did, kind of like the other detective did a few weeks ago. I didn't think she stumped him. Mallory, right? Lawrence Mallory. Lawrence, right? Remember him a couple weeks ago? Well, there was another hearing for the 30th. 30th just happened. So let's check it out together. Let's watch and kind of sit back, get yourself something to drink. And I'm going to watch Brett Payne. If you guys want to join me, let's watch together.
Thank you, Your Honor. After last week, we had one witness testify, and I have 2 additional witnesses this morning, and then there will be witnesses this afternoon in closed session as well.
Okay.
And I'd be prepared to call my next witness.
Okay, go ahead.
Call Brett Payne.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Please come forward. Raise your right hand.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do. All right, thank you, sir. Please have a seat. And then when you're seated, please state your name and spell your last.
Name is Brett Payne, last spelled P-A-Y-N-E.
All right, thank you, sir. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morgan.
Will you tell us your occupation?
I am currently employed by the Moscow Police Department as the detective corporal.
What experience do you have prior to Moscow Police Department?
I was served in the military for 6 years. 3 of those were as a commissioned officer in the military police corps.
How long have you been with Moscow Police Department?
6 years.
We're here to talk about the case of the state of Idaho versus Bryan Kohberger. Have you worked on that case?
Yes, ma'am.
What is your role in that case?
I was assigned as the case agent for Moscow PD for that investigation.
Does case agent mean you're the person in charge?
Yes, ma'am.
If I called you the lead detective, would that be a term that means the same thing as person in charge and
Yes,
case
ma'am.
agent?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. What were your general responsibilities as the lead detective in the case?
So when I became case agent, I was assigned to work the command post that was established at the Moscow Police Department, along with my partners in Idaho State Police and the FBI. We managed the command post and directed the general direction of local investigation.
Would that mean you would be a person to write warrants and affidavits in support of warrants?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you conduct or direct interviews?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you search for a suspect?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you the go-to person or the person in charge for evidence that would be brought into Moscow Police Department to support your case?
No, ma'am, I was not.
Who's in charge?
That would have been our evidence custodian.
As the lead detective, were you aware of the evidence that would be under the control of the evidence custodian?
Not entirely. I was made aware of basically the most pertinent evidence that was coming in, but was not aware of every single piece of evidence that was brought into the police.
Okay. During the course of, I guess, the investigation from November 13th forward, was there videos that were collected, like a video canvas done of the community?
Yes, ma'am, there was.
Is that something you were involved in?
No, ma'am, I was not involved in the direct collection of those videos.
Who is responsible for the video collection and knowing what videos exist?
So the way that worked was individual investigators who went out in the community and collected those videos, brought them back to the police department, and provided them to our digital forensics office, and then they were later booked in through that channel.
So the digital forensics office would be the responsible entity to receive these pieces of video surveillance, is that right?
Yes, ma'am, I would say it was a dropping off point for those pieces, yes.
And who is that person?
That was a joint effort between Detective Mowry and several people within the FBI.
Which people within the FBI?
I do not remember.
Detective Payne, I'm asking because last week, Detective Mowry told us that he wasn't in charge of these videos, and I need to know what they are. Do you have any idea who the FBI agents are that were also in charge of this?
We could certainly find that out for you, yes, ma'am. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, well, I'm going to need to do that. Let's talk a little bit about what surveillance is out there. These were cameras from different businesses, is that right?
Yes, ma'am, as well as some private residences.
Let's focus on the businesses for just a minute. Those would be collected at main points in Moscow where you might find a person of interest, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. We canvassed pretty much the entire city of Moscow looking for places that were willing to or could provide us video.
And was it also important to think about if somebody were to come into or leave Moscow, the kind of video cameras you might find on those areas?
Certainly, yes, ma'am.
And that would be the east-west road between Moscow and Pullman, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Referring to SR-270/Pullman Road. They wanted that to refer to.
I know that as the Moscow-Pullman Highway.
Yep.
I think that's the same thing, or Highway 8.
Works for me.
And that goes from Pullman out towards Troy and that area.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And also important in that video collection would be the north-south Highway 95, the north end of Moscow and the south part of Moscow. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so you collected business videos or had that done, but who I need to talk to about this would be Detective Mowry or an unnamed FBI agent. Do I
Or
understand that?
the agents who were the officers, investigators who collected that specific video would have written reports to the best of my knowledge, stating such that they collected video from X, Y, and Z. That would be the best person to speak to about that particular video.
But if they collected it and gave it to Moscow Police Department or the digital evidence people, isn't it your department that I'd be looking at to say, where is this now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about some of those specific ones, but you brought up residential cameras in that canvas as well. Are you talking about things like Ring cameras?
Yes, ma'am. Ring cameras and other sorts of private security systems that people have had.
Ring cameras have a way of sending out a notice to Ring camera owners to check their data. Is that right?
I believe so.
Was that done in this case?
I do not remember if that was done or not.
Are you familiar with some of the Ring cameras or home surveillance videos in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
In particular, I think your affidavit talked about one on Indian Hills Road. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
How did that camera come to your attention?
I believe Detective Vargas works for MPD. She contacted the residents at that, or the person who lives at that residence, and they provided that camera footage to Detective Vargas.
Do you know why she contacted them?
I believe it was part of just a video canvas, best of my knowledge.
Now, I want to talk about some of the specific businesses, and you mentioned that I'd be looking at a police report to tell me if it existed or not. As the case manager or the detective, are you familiar with the reports from other officers that may have talked about turning in videos?
Some of them, certainly not all of them.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that he be handed two defendants' exhibits. They are RR and SS. No, Mr. Chair. One of the videos I want to talk about comes from the Red Star Coffee Company. Do you know where that business is located?
Yes, ma'am.
Where is it?
That's on Pullman Road and right next to the Stinker Station.
So the Pullman Road that's also known as Moscow Pullman Road that within the city of Moscow?
Correct.
Okay. And if you look at exhibit RR, and if I can draw your attention to on page 2 to paragraph 9 and page 3, paragraph 9 continues over there.
Red Star.
Based on your review of that, am I correct in believing that the Red Star surveillance video was collected and given to Moscow Police Department?
It reads that way, yes, ma'am.
Where is it?
I do not know.
Who do I ask? Which it is?
That would be through the evidence custodian and MPD. That'd be my best direction for you.
So I need to go to the evidence custodian and ask him to bring all of the videos out so I can watch them all to see if that one exists.
Yes, ma'am.
How many hours of videotape do you think have been collected?
A lot.
Thousands?
Yes, easily.
Detective Payne, I want to look at defendant's exhibit SS now. Don't put RR away. I think we might go back there in just a minute. But SS, if I can draw your attention to paragraph 1.
Okay.
Would I be correct in believing that I should be able to have a videotape from a place called Money's Machine?
Yes, ma'am.
Where's Money's Machine?
I don't know where Monday's machine is, ma'am. Does not sound familiar to me.
Can you see the address that's also listed in paragraph 1?
Yes, ma'am.
Does that help you know where Money's Machine might be?
It'd be south of Moscow city limits, if memory serves, but that's the best I can recall.
You don't know where this particular numbered address on South Main might be?
No, ma'am.
Well, let's go back to, let me ask you this. Who do I ask where that video is?
Restate what I did before is go through the evidence custodian at Moscow PD.
Let's go back to RR for a minute, and if you can turn with me to page 4. I'll draw your attention to paragraph number 21, particularly subparts B, C, D, and G. Do you see where I'm talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
And there, we're talking about 4 different businesses all within the city of Moscow. Is that right?
That is correct.
And those are on Main Street in Moscow. Is that also right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And if I read the first sentence in that paragraph, am I correct in believing that Moscow Police Department should be in possession of all of those videos?
It reads that way, yes, ma'am.
Where are they?
I would have to direct you to the video that have been turned into the evidence lab at Moscow PD.
I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to move from videos now, and I want to talk a little bit about affidavits and search warrants that you wrote.
Can I ask a question? You're not asking to admit these exhibits?
You know, Your Honor, I haven't.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I haven't. The court has those in a pre-filing to put the court and counsel on notice of things we talked about. I'm not going to ask that these be admitted this way. Detective Payne didn't write them, but he's familiar with the content, so I think I have the questions answered. Thank you. Let's talk about affidavits. and search warrants permanent. Did you author affidavits in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you use affidavits you authored in support of search warrants to obtain information that you wanted to take a look at?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you author the affidavit that was used for the arrest warrant for Bryan Kohberger?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you rely on when you wrote these affidavits?
Be more specific.
Yes, let's focus on the affidavit for the AT&T records. There were 2 search warrants on December 23rd, 2022. Are you with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so let's talk about those search warrants and the affidavit. First, the affidavit. What did you rely on in the affidavit you wrote for the first AT&T search warrant on December 23rd, 2022?
It was a conglomerate of interviews, data received from cell phones, my observations of some surveillance footage that was taking place, various other things. Go down the line, if you could be more specific on specific parts, I'd be happy to tell you what I'd like.
Okay. There was a part of the affidavit where you talked about WSU officers identifying white Elantras.
Yes, ma'am.
And there was a part of the affidavit where you talked about 2011 to 2013 Elantras, and then it expanded to 2016 to include the year of 2016 Elantras.
Yes, ma'am.
What I want to know first is what you relied on to expand that search from 2013 to include 14, 15, and 16.
That information was provided to FBI Special Agent Imel, who's a vehicle identification specialist. He used snapshots from the previously mentioned surveillance videos, and that was his determination on the types of vehicles we should be looking for, rather the year range we should look for. It would be in his report, we'd be more specific, but that was what I based the affidavit off of, that portion of it.
I understand as far as when we get to 2013, but when we go beyond that, what did you rely on to get beyond that?
It would have been his input as an expert in vehicle identification. That's what.
Okay. Part of your affidavit talks about WSU officers finding white Elantras. And I believe there was an officer that you had some communication with. Do you recall the date you had that communication?
I do not recall the date.
Did you have some messaging system exchange with this officer to talk about that?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the only means of communication you had with this officer?
No, ma'am. I believe I spoke to him on the telephone as well.
When you spoke to him on the telephone, how did that relate to the date of the messaging?
It would have likely been, if memory serves, it would likely been that same day.
Okay. Does December 20th, 2022 sound familiar to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And so this conversation, this officer from Washington, it related backwards to when he noticed an Elantra. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
But when he noticed it, you didn't know about that yet. Is that also correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so you don't know about him or talk to him until December 20th, 2022, correct?
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
In your affidavits, did you rely on cell phone information and cell phone location information?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you work with cell phone records yourself?
No, ma'am.
Did you see cell phone records yourself?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
When was the first time you saw cell phone records that were attributed to Bryan Kohberger?
I do not remember what date that was.
Well, maybe you can give me an estimate. We know on the 20th, you're talking to WSU about an observation from a month before. And we know on December 23rd, you're asking for AT&T warrants for information. Can you narrow it down?
Yes.
Sorry, Judge.
That's a yes. You can, I just want to get the record. Yes?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
So between those 2 dates, does that help you identify the first time you saw cell phone records related to Bryan Kohberger?
Memory serves, the first time I saw any cell phone records related to Bryan Kohberger was after we received the return from the first search warrant.
Just to be sure I'm tracking with you, when you say the return from the first search warrant, we're talking about the first AT&T warrant.
Yes,
Is that right?
That's correct.
And in that warrant, you were seeking 48 hours worth of records. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So if I call those 48-hour records, we'll both be on the same page?
Yep.
All right. You wrote your second AT&T warrant for a much longer period of phone records that same day, December 23rd, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
How far ahead of that warrant did you see the records?
It would have been upon the receipt of the 48-hour records that came in from AT&T. Immediately after receiving those, I began writing that second section of the second AT&T warrant for the longer period. That makes sense.
It does. So you get these records and you take a look at them and you start writing your warrant. Is that right?
The records were provided to FBI Special Agent Balance, who began deciphering them. I'm not an expert in cell phone records.
That was the next thing I was going to ask you.
So, no, ma'am, I'm not. So, he was the one who was conveying that information to me, so I could understand what it was.
So do you get the records and then get them to him somehow?
Yes, ma'am.
The records do they go directly to Balance?
I do not recall what the distribution was on the return itself. I do not recall that.
Are you and Balance exchanging emails about these records?
No, ma'am. Not that I remember.
How did you get them to them?
We were co-located. At the time, Detective Balance was at the Moscow Police Department about 30 feet down the hallway.
Are the two of you exchanging text messaging during this time?
I do not remember if you texted during that time.
I may have a record that would refresh your memory. I'm certainly not seeking to have these admitted, but I'd like to hand him some records to see if we can refresh his memory. Do you recognize what's been placed in front of you?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Okay. Does reading the content of some December 23rd messages refresh your recollection about participating in text messages with Nicholas Balance?
It really does not, ma'am.
Will you look at, there's 3 separate stapled documents. Will you move that one and go to the next one?
Still on December 23rd?
Yeah.
I do vaguely remember that exchange, the one at the top of the second.
Is that the one that starts with you identifying yourself?
No, ma'am, it starts with the message says, group text for this weekend, Maria, Nick, Ed, Brett, and Darren.
You look at that third one.
Seems vaguely familiar.
Okay. So just so I'm clear then, Nick Balance is at Moscow Police Department when you're getting, on December 23rd, when you're getting these 2 warrants. Is that right?
If memory serves, that's correct.
Okay. Well, you told me that you're not the guy who understands how to interpret these records. Do you know anything about cell phone towers?
Very little, ma'am.
Okay. So when you wrote the second AT&T warrant, you have possession of Bryan Kohberger's call detail records or AT&T records, but you don't know what they mean, so you're relying on somebody else.
Yes, ma'am.
Who all did you rely on?
Mainly it was Special Agent Balance. He was my main point of contact for understanding what was going on.
Okay. In fact, in your affidavit for the second AT&T report, there's a couple of maps in there. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And one of them has some video camera information. That's the first map. Where did that come from?
I do not recall. If you have a copy of it, I can refresh my memory and tell you.
I bet I do. I have what we've marked defendants B.
Are you referring to there's two maps, the WSU focused map you're referring to? It's completely washed out on this copy. I can't see what it is.
It's hard to see, isn't it? What I want to know is what you relied on to get that first one that talks about WSU and the cameras of WSU. Where'd you get that?
Yes, ma'am. So Special Agent Rob Hilley with the FBI was also co-located with us. He was tasked with analyzing that video from WSU and the surrounding area. So it was a conversation between he and I, pointing out areas of locations where the car was likely seen on surveillance footage. And that's what I relied upon to create that map.
So you created that map how?
Through PowerPoint, I believe, ma'am, my research.
You saved your work on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's go to the next map. That one would appear to be a trail or a path from south of Moscow back towards Lewiston or back towards Payne. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Where did you get that now?
Same thing. It was just created using open source satellite imagery and I think it was PowerPoint.
Did you create that?
Yes, ma'am.
Where did you get the information to draw that trail?
So that was used from the cell phone records referred to me by Special Agent Balance on his interpretation of possible places where someone could have driven between the location that it starts there and then back to Poland.
So you did this on some open source mapping, not anything from Nick Balance creating a visual for you.
No, ma'am. I did view a draft report from Special Agent Balance to help me conceptualize this, but it did not look like this map.
Where's that draft report?
It is, best of my knowledge, it's already been provided to the prosecutor's office through the FBI channels.
Is this the lengthy past draft report or is it a different draft report?
Well, it would have to be the draft cast report. That's the only cast report I'm aware of from Special Agent Balance.
So on December 23rd, are you saying you looked at this past draft report to make that map that went into your affidavit to get the second set of records?
Yes, ma'am.
The one that was given to us in July of last year?
I don't know when you got it.
How many versions of that cast draft report have you seen?
I've only seen that one, ma'am. That's the only one I'm aware of.
Okay. And from the FBI, we have Agent Balance and Agent Hilley at Moscow Police Department with you. Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
And all of this work is done with verbal communication. Is that right?
The majority of it, yes, ma'am.
And Nick Balance's cast draft report.
Correct.
And I think Special Agent Eimel's vehicle identification.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's talk about what you were seeking to get in this. Well, let me ask this before I leave the second search warrant. Is there anything else you relied on to obtain that second search warrant to compose your affidavit?
Like I said earlier, we relied on cell phone records from surviving roommates as well as the victims. We relied on interviews with the two surviving roommates that were present at the time. We relied on the surveillance footage, cell phone data. I'd have to go paragraph by paragraph, but that's what jumps to mind.
Of those things, are you relying on other people's work to put that all together?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now I'm ready to talk about the things that same day as the first one. And was there anything else from AT&T that you saw or relied on to get the second one off the ground?
No, ma'am.
And in the first AT&T search warrant, are you aware that part of the request was for timing advance reports?
Yes, ma'am.
And in fact, that also appears in your second search warrant request, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And not only do you ask for the timing advance reports from AT&T, you asked for them from several other companies, correct? Verizon's version of it, T-Mobile's version of this kind of timing advance report. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. When was the first time you saw AT&T's timing advance report?
I do not recall when I first saw it.
Where is it?
To the best of my knowledge, all that information from those returns has been provided to the prosecutor's office.
If I tell you I don't have a timing advance report or any from the other phone companies, where do I look for them?
I would direct you back to the prosecutor's office. Everything that Moscow PD received, in that realm, we have turned over to my knowledge.
But you know you've seen this report, is that right?
I do not recall if I've seen the timing advance reports. I'd have to see what it even looked like to know if I'd seen it.
Do you know what it is?
Not particularly. I'm no expert.
Okay. You wrote the search warrant though, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, how did you get the language for that if you don't know what this is?
So there's no secret that I rely heavily on people who are very highly educated in these topic areas to write this search warrant. So that language was likely conveyed to me through people who know much more than myself about cell phone data.
Who are those people?
Like I said, FBI agent Balance and Detective Mowry were probably my two main points of contact for helping me with that language.
During the course of your investigation and work on the case that became the case that we're here for now, did you communicate with Agent Balance by email?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you communicate with other FBI agents by email?
Yes, ma'am.
And did that relate to the investigation of the scene and later the investigation of Bryan Kohberger?
Certainly, yes, ma'am.
Were those communications that assisted you in preparing affidavits and search warrants to carry out your duties in the case?
I do not recall.
But you recall the emails themselves
I recall sending emails to FBI agents, yes, but
And-
specifics.
and receiving them?
Yes, ma'am.
Where are those emails now?
All emails that Moscow PD is aware of have been turned over to the prosecutor's office.
Your Honor, if I could have just a minute.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions for now, but I think you have a couple of exhibits on that front end. If you don't need them for us, maybe I'll take them back.
Oh, hold on. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I'll.
Yes. Okay. I thought you were just stepping on, so. Any?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
Your knowledge, have all the evidence in Moscow Police Department's possession been turned over to the state for us to discover?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you facilitated the defense visiting MPD to review the physical evidence in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Approximately how many times have you done that?
I had to guess, I'd say 6.
Now, let's talk specifically about this video surveillance. Explain to me the process for collecting video surveillance.
So in this investigation, the way that played out was we directed the investigators to go into the community and collect any available surveillance footage there was. Once they had done that, they were tasked with bringing it back to Moscow Police Department, placing it in the digital forensics lab, and then writing a supplemental report on where they collected that information. That was the process.
Do you know how many agencies helped in this video canvassing?
Certainly the FBI and the Idaho State Police. I'm not sure if any other agencies helped. I don't know.
Do you know approximately how many agents were out collecting video?
Easily over a dozen. I don't know the specific number, but
Isn't it true that investigators collected video surveillance from approximately 79 businesses
yes, ma'am.
and approximately 10 residences? So let's talk about the areas that Ms. Taylor mentioned. Isn't it true that there's other surveillance video capturing the Moscow-Pullman Highway, specifically on the way to Pullman?
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it true we've turned over video for banks
Yes,
on
ma'am.
that highway? Isn't it true we've turned over surveillance for stores on that highway?
Yes.
Isn't it true we've turned over video for gas stations?
Yes.
Now let's talk about the Troy Highway towards Troy. Is it true we've turned over surveillance video for fast food restaurants,
Yes.
gas stations,
Yes.
and now US 95 towards Coeur d'Alene? Is it true we've turned over surveillance video for hardware stores,
Yes.
gas stations?
Yes.
Now, what about US 95 towards Lewiston? Is it true we've turned over surveillance video for gas stations,
Yes.
as well as apartments?
Yes.
Now let's move to your PC affidavit. Can you explain to me what did the investigation look like during the time that you were writing that affidavit?
So as I said, the command center was established at the Moscow Police Department. The command center consisted of myself and numerous partners from the FBI and the Idaho State Police. We were all co-located there at Moscow PD. We also had individual sections assigned to do various tasks like video, conduct interviews, so on and so forth. The majority of those people were also co-located at the Moscow Police Department. So as the process for developing this affidavit began, those people would just come into the command center and relay information that was deemed to be critical or important. The reason for that was to shorten the chain of information to make sure that the folks, myself and my partners in the command post, got the clearest view of what the investigators on the ground were actually retrieving and learning as this went on. As they relayed that to me, I input that into the affidavit.
And is that standard to rely on what other investigators tell you when you're applying for warrants?
Absolutely.
And is that what you did?
Yes, ma'am.
And is what you relied upon detailed in your probable cause affidavit?
Yes.
Now, talking about the timing advance records, are you aware that AT&T didn't provide timing advance records in December of 2022?
I do not remember.
Are you aware that they did not start providing those records until May of 2023?
Objection, lady.
Cross-examination.
It is vulnerable. Go ahead.
I'll re-ask. Are you aware that AT&T did not start providing those records until May of 2023?
Yes.
I don't have anything for
Thank you. Ms. Taylor?
Thanks. Let's start there. May of 2023. Do you have timing advance records now from May of 2023?
I would have to direct you to Detective Mallory to answer that question. Don't know.
Okay. Did you write a new warrant for them in May of 2023?
I do not recall.
If you included them in two separate warrants in December of 2022, but they didn't provide them, why would you do that?
It was the language that was suggested to me to write the affidavit. So
Language suggested by an FBI agent who's an expert in the field?
it's maybe.
Yes. And do you know if he saw the timing advance reports?
I do not know. All right.
Now, those first and second AT&T warrants were how many hours from receiving the return on the first one until the second one was given to Judge Marshall at 4:45?
I do not remember.
Not very many hours, though. Would that be fair?
Likely not.
I want to talk a little bit more about the video and what's been turned over and what hasn't been turned over to us. And I want to focus a little bit on South US 95. Do you recall that south of Moscow on US 95 is the path that you put in your search warrant and affidavit alleging that Bryan Kohberger left Moscow going south on US 95?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And are you aware that one of the videos that you gave us, the coffee shop there on South 95, that leaving Moscow, you have to pass that covers 5 a.m. to 6 a.m.?
I do not recall the time frame for that.
And so the time frame in these videos would matter, right?
Certainly.
The time frame in the videos to be meaningful would need to cover a time that surrounds the allegations against Mr. Kohberger. Is that fair to say?
You can say that, yes.
Okay. And are you aware that Watson Kari Construction had a video, and that also has a very limited time frame, like 5 a.m., just 1 hour of video also?
Sounds vaguely familiar, yes.
And that's also south on Highway 95. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And the one we talked about today, Monday's machine that nobody could find, that clearly was given to Moscow Police Department, that's also south on 95.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I understand that you had a lot of help on canvassing and collecting things. There was a lot to do. But as the lead agent and the lead department, is there some kind of inventory of these videos, like a general inventory that would help me know what you have and why you don't have the relevant timeframes?
The inventory that would be most useful to you is the inventory of evidence that has been booked into the Moscow Police Department. That's the inventory.
And I did come see the evidence. That's fair. I did come see the evidence. We didn't watch videos together though, did we?
No, ma'am.
And would you agree that that evidence is on thumb drives with stickies on papers that tell us different things, but not like an inventory of what's on each thumb drive?
I am not aware of an inventory of each individual thumb drive.
Okay. So for us to do that together would take some days to inventory it all together. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's my best way to try to find this Monday's machine
Sure.
and Watson Carty Construction.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's it. Thanks.
All right, Ms. Taylor, anything to follow up on that, Ms. Jennings?
Oh, just one second. Thank you. I just want to clarify what's in your probable cause affidavit. Does your probable cause affidavit state that Kohberger or White Elantra went on US 95 south of Moscow?
No, it's not.
Okay. What does it state?
Memory serves states that the next time, well, it states that a vehicle was seen leaving the area of the crime scene, McKinney Road, leaving via Walenta Drive, which heads south from that area, and then terminates on Conestoga and Goose River Drive. That's what the probable cause affidavit states.
And to your knowledge, are there other paths of travel south of Moscow besides US 95?
Yes.
And what's that other route?
I believe the one that was referenced in the affidavit goes from Goose River Drive, which turns into Sand Road at the state line, at the Idaho-Washington state line. That road continues westbound until south of Pullman and eventually leads north into Pullman at Bishop Boulevard, if memory serves.
And does that path of travel go by Watson Carty Construction?
I do not believe it does.
Did you attempt to obtain surveillance on that path of travel that doesn't go through 95?
Yes, we did.
And were you successful?
I don't believe we were.
I don't have anything further.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Are you testifying that Mr. Kohberger did not use Highway 95 south of Moscow on November 13th?
I am testifying that there are various routes that a person could take south of Moscow to include Highway 95. There are also several others.
Which one does your map depict?
I believe the map starts well south of Moscow, or more towards JSC, and there is the line that starts there. However, I would direct you to the paragraph at the beginning of the map that says this is a possible route to travel between the two locations.
So you're just not sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That would include then Highway 95 south of Moscow.
Yes, ma'am. What?
And that would include other possible routes.
Yes, ma'am.
How many video surveillance attempts did you make to get video from businesses or homes on all of those routes?
I do not recall, but it continued for some time, attempting to find additional video footage.
What did you find?
Nothing to my recollection.
Not one video depicting the car.
To my memory, no.
Good enough, thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay, great. In this, Detective Payne be excused at this point?
He can be, thank you.
Okay, any objections? All right. Thanks, sir. Thanks for being here. You can, you're free to stay or leave.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Interesting. So, Brett Payne, lead detective, reliable or not? Do you think he did good on the stand? What's your thoughts on the chain of command in reference to surveillance, cell phone data? Seems like a lot of others were doing actually the footwork. When it comes to the surveillance, others, Idaho State Police, FBI, Lawrence Mallory, others out there going around, or actually said like 12 people out there on the field getting surveillances, and then bringing the surveillance to a digital forensic center at the Moscow PD, which eventually gets into Payne's hands. Kind of just like the cell phone stuff. The other agents, one thing about going back to the surveillance aspect, notice he didn't know a lot of the names of the people that were doing it. So it looks like a lot of people out there doing it. And then with the cell phone, same process out there. Other people in that specialty field brings it there. And then Payne uses the information to obtain search warrants. Seems like the 20th was when it really got cooking. The 20th. 23rd, arrest or arrest warrant for the 28th, I think around 28th of December. We got places called Red Star, Money's Machine, Wassapari Construction, some unknown coffee shop south of 95. What do you think Ann Taylor was trying to do? Was she trying to get information on other names that were involved with the chain of command or the obtain of these 79 businesses? 79 businesses, thousands of hours of surveillance. Payne doesn't know who did it. Well, he said Mallory's part. You have to check with Mallory. Was this a fishing expedition by Ann Taylor to get more information? I didn't see any stumping. Prosecution really doesn't ask Brett Payne many questions. So that's interesting. We got to hear Brett Payne served in the military. Do you guys have confidence in his work? I know one of the victims' families were very critical of him, saying he was lacked at the time. Goncalves' family said he lacked experience, because he was fairly new to the department. I think it's interesting, though. And it just shows that a lot of people were out there working to come to this conclusion, and all this evidence comes funneling in. Also, what about, a lot of people were saying about Payne, this could be a cover-up or Payne's framing Kohberger. My take on that is, how could he have done that when numerous other officers and numerous other people, detectives and everything like that, was involved with all the evidence gathering that just ultimately went to Payne? But how could Payne himself frame Kohberger? Unless you think it's a group effort. And I'm saying this because a lot of people out there think Kohberger's framed. Not a lot, but there's people. I think it's a small fringe group, actually. But there's people that talk about it, but he almost validated that it's almost impossible to frame him himself, frame Kohberger, because the other people are the ones that bring it in, unless the digital forensic lab's the one that framed them. Interesting. So Cy Ray, he also spoke. Maybe we'll play that on another segment. I just didn't want to do a 3-hour live, but I wanted to do Payne and hear Payne. Some of you saw this, some of you haven't. So we got an understanding of this process. Very, very interesting. And there was other unnamed. There's 79 different businesses. I remember that they mentioned Indian Hills. Indian Hills was that location east of Moscow. I guess somebody there contacted authorities and said, hey, I got something. White Hyundai Elantra. Kohberger's going to have to explain, his defense is going to have to explain about the car with the license plates, because up there in that area, got to have 2 license plates, front and back. Well, he had Pennsylvania plates before, after the crime, he re-registered it. But at the time of the crime, he had Pennsylvania plates. Only 1 plate in the back. So how's he going to explain when all these surveillance comes out and sees this white Hyundai Elantra zooming around at different locations in Moscow without a front plate? What are the odds? What are the odds? But, on this channel, I take the position I feel Kohberger's guilty. But on this channel, we have a lot of different opinions. So I appreciate and respect all your opinions about this. And more will keep coming out. I'm reading the chat. Thanks for watching, everyone. JLR Investigates. Until next time, we cover Kohberger case. The plan for me and Magnolia will be to attend his trial. If he goes to trial, we'll be there, wherever it may be, Moscow, Latah County, Ada County, or whatever county in Idaho, if they get a change of venue. I want it to be in Boise. I got my note. I had my notepad. I was taking notes. So we might do Cy Ray later on. So stay tuned for that. We cover true crime 24/7, 365. Praying for the victims' families. I'm sure the victims' families do not like to see these hearings and hearings and hearings and hearings without even a trial date. I feel really bad, particularly for the Goncalves family, who I've met and respect them dearly. And I'll have to reach out and see how they feel about it. I think maybe they gave a statement or something, just said, I don't know what they said. I don't know what they said about yesterday's hearing, but no trial date, folks. So you gotta imagine putting yourself in the victim's family shoes and just hearing all this and seeing all this. Michelle Troconis sentenced to 20 years in prison. I just got the notification. So anyone following the case, Fotes duelist Michelle Troconis, she got 20 years in prison and 5 years probation. So I'll go look into that case and see what's going on. She had sentencing today. All right, folks. Thanks for watching. JLR Investigates. Took the camera to the side today. See that? Ooh, see that? JLR. Look at that. My mother gave me that. My mother gave me that right there. I think it's pretty cool. And all these like inspirational success, perseverance, persistence, writer's market. We try to have the tools to make ourselves better every day. I hope you guys are having a great day. Take care of yourself. God bless. Until next time, JLR Investigates. Have a good day, everyone. Peace out.